Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Getting Value from Your Asset Data, an Introduction to Mining Your Asset Database. My name is Natalie Kramer, and I'm the Event Planner and Online Marketing Specialist here at Cartegraph. And here with me today is Todd Henderson, Cartegraph Subject Matter Expert and presenter of today's webinar. For those of you not familiar with Todd, he worked with the town of Marana, Arizona for over 6 years, most recently as the Utilities Resource Coordinator. While at Marana, he implemented Cartegraph on all levels, in the field, in the office, and eventually managing the system as co-administrator for the entire city. Before we get started, we wanted to let you know that we are accepting your questions. Just use the question and answer or the chat tool located within the WebEx program, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Natalie. It's good to be with all of you today. And we're going to talk about how to mine data for asset information. And hopefully we'll spark some thoughts in your mind about how you can more effectively gather data out of your system. This is something that I worked quite a bit on in my experience when I was using the software as a client, and something that I got a lot of benefit out of. So my desire is hopefully to take some of the things that I learned in the process of mining for data in the system, and also gleaning from others that I've learned from over time that use the system, and all the data that they've extracted from it, and hopefully help you to really get more value out of your investment in the software, and be able to get some information that will help you to make some decisions regarding your assets, the workflows that you do, in order to more effectively manage them. So that's really the purpose of what we're going to cover today. And so we'll just go ahead and get right into it. And like Natalie said, feel free at the, as we go through to type questions, and we'll be happy to answer as many of those as we possibly can at the end of this. If we do not have the information or cannot answer your question right on the spot, then we certainly will get someone in touch with you to give you that answer, because we want to do our best, obviously, to be as expeditious as possible about getting answers to you, because when those questions come up, you really need to know. So we'll do our best to do that. So again, thanks for being with us today, and we're going to go ahead and get right into our webinar. The first thing I want to talk to you about today is generating data. And I just use this reverse engineer to get results. And what I mean by that is, obviously, it's necessary to input data in order to generate the kind of data that will assist you in making decisions that will maximize the value of your software. It'll certainly increase your return on investment, or your ROI. And so what you need to do in order to make this, I think, the most effective possible, is when you're thinking about generating data, the question naturally comes, well, what am I going to need out of the system? Now, obviously, in a group like this, we have a pretty good crowd here today, so you're probably at different points in your use of the software. So some of you might be just beginning, so this is very helpful as you start. Others, you've owned the software a while, and you just want to know how you can get more out of it. So hopefully, as we go through this, I'll cover hopefully as many areas as possible, and address as many people in your unique situations as I possibly can. If not, obviously, ask questions at the end, and I'll do my best to, if I neglect to cover something that will help you, obviously we'll do that. So when you think about generating data, obviously you're inputting a lot of data. You're entering assets. Hopefully you're entering, through your work process system, you're entering in work against those assets. If not, I would encourage you to do so. The reason being, that will give you a better understanding of what that asset is costing you over its life. And that's really where decisions are made, and where really kind of the good data comes from. So when we talk about reverse engineering it to get results, you want to think of, what data is it that I'm going to want to see? What do I want this to tell me about the assets and the work that we're doing here in my organization? So what I did and what I've seen others do in my experience to get the most out of it is to think to yourself, okay, what questions do I need to answer? What is it that I need to produce out of this system that's going to answer the most questions for me? So that's the rule that I use to input the data. In other words, are people going to want to know, or is the question ever going to be asked? You know, what brand of water hydrants give us the most dependable service, or which ones have the most downtime? Which sign company seems to deliver the best product? There's a lot of different things you can enter into the data, and you'll get some really good results. As far as work, some of the stuff you can enter is if some organizations count the drive time to the event as part of the work. Others don't. They count it a different way. So you have to think through those types of issues to ask yourself, what kind of data do I want this system to give me? What questions will be asked? And so the questions that will be asked and what you will need, that kind of helps determine what you're going to put into the system, how granular you're going to get. When we were doing facilities, trying to get a hold of all of our facilities, we asked ourselves a series of questions. And what I found was very helpful, and perhaps this would be helpful to you, is I just got on a whiteboard and myself and a couple others got together and just started asking ourselves questions like, you know, are we going to need to know, we need to know whether it's a carpeted floor or a tiled floor, but do we want to know the manufacturers? That's something we're going to want to know. If so, we better put a field in for that. If not, we won't. So it just depends on how granular you want to get and how detailed you want your reporting to be. But I've found that in my experience, the more data that you can generate and the more questions you can answer, it's much, much better to go ahead and put that data in, because it's better to have a little too much data than not enough, obviously. And if someone, especially in leadership, asks you a certain question, you know, you want to be able to have this system answer that. So, for example, someone asked me one time in a certain section of our community, how much is the non-potable water costing us as far as repairs and maintenance? What is that system costing us? Well, thankfully, that was one of the questions I ran through on the whiteboard and asked myself, you know, are we going to want to know, obviously, the maintenance cost between potable and non-potable? So any lines that we had that were non-potable water, I marked those as such. I put that in the field. So that's really what I'm talking about when we talk about reverse engineering, just discovering what is it that I'm going to want to know kind of at the end of all this, and then so that's what information I'm going to put in. Now, if you've been doing this for a while and want to produce data, then you can obviously add to what you have. And so you can import data, you can update it, and yeah, you know, it takes a little bit of work, but if you're discovering some questions are not being answered that, you know, providing some more data would answer, then go ahead and do that. This next slide I want to kind of show here, and this is our OMS, our Operations Management System, a screenshot of what it shows. And as we look on here, we see there's some information here about this main. Its diameter, its material, the manufacturer, here again, potable versus non-potable. And so when you put this data in, then what it'll do is it's critical to producing the information that will really help you in making future decisions that'll save money. So we see here that this total cost to date is $14,576. We might want to look at the other mains to see what they're costing us, whether it was through installation or maintenance or anything. We might want to report by ductile iron pipe versus PVC pipe. What is costing us more to maintain? What is more durable? What lasts longer, etc. Some of those things you'll know just because of common knowledge, but other things you're going to want to need to dig in and know. Also, the manufacturer. Are we going to want to know the manufacturer? Will it matter? It may not, but it's good, obviously, in this case, to have it there. Also by size. Are the smaller mains costing us more to maintain as opposed to larger? Things like that. There's all kinds of, and these are just obviously examples, but these are all things that you input in the data to ask yourself the question, you know, am I making the best decisions on these assets? Are we more effectively managing? And the data is what will obviously produce that. So then you have, in the next slide, excuse me, the next slide we're going to have, you have needs and data has the answers. Now, what I want to cover on this part is to do your best to notice the types of questions that the leadership of your organization is asking, and then allow the data to answer those questions. And I would also encourage you to be proactive by asking your own questions. In other words, try to anticipate maybe some questions that may be asked and answers you may need to provide. This could be very helpful in a situation that is critical and kind of last minute. I know there was an incident where an organization had put in their GIS system all of the storm sewer grates that were on curbsides. And what happened was people came by and they kind of disguised themselves. They drove a white truck and had a yellow light on the top and would put out a couple barricades, take the storm grate off and put it back in the truck and then drive away. And this happened a bunch of different places, and people really didn't think anything of it because they had vests on and everything, but there was no label on the truck. So long story short, it turns out they stole over 180 sewer grates, those curbside storm sewer grates, and were selling them for scrap. So the long story short is, thankfully, this organization had all of their curbside sewer grates storm sewer grates in Cartegraph, had them referenced in GIS, and had values assigned of what they cost to install and everything. So within just a couple minutes, they were able to generate a report that said this is how much it cost us, but they also put in there this is what it cost us to reinstall them. And then what they did was they tack welded a couple tack welds so that they couldn't be stolen in the future. So they eventually caught the individuals who did this, prosecuted them, and this organization was able to give an exact dollar amount of how much it cost the organization in replacing those, not only replacing, but the labor, equipment, and materials to reinstall them, tack weld them, etc. So data can really, provide a lot of answers. And that was a case where that organization was really, really glad that they had that information because it was something that came up very quickly, suddenly, and unexpectedly. So, a FEMA emergency or something like that, you're going to be glad that you have those answers, and data will provide those answers. So in something of a little bit less dramatic of an illustration, as opposed to stealing sewer grates, we have here kind of a normal asset, a water hydrant here. And I pulled this as a screenshot from OMS as far as the asset summary and the maintenance cost that this particular hydrant had. So we see here, we have the manufacturer and the model, and then we also have some information here about what the total cost has been over the lifespan, of this asset. So we see that it was replaced in 2004, and it was last inspected in October of 2014, so a 10-year span. Over a 10-year span, it looks like it cost about $3,100. So, that's a situation where you might want to look at other hydrants that are about that age, see what they're costing you per year, and then look at the brands. Maybe a certain brand costs more. You may want to, obviously need to know that. So there's a lot of information that you can find. The average yearly cost of each asset's maintenance, not only the installation cost, but what is the ongoing cost of that asset? How much do you have to maintain this? And one of the things that I think is interesting that I heard someone bring up one time was they actually discovered, now this was in relation to signs, that they were inspecting signs on a certain rotation, on a certain amount of time. And as they began to do that and they saw the roll-up cost of what signs were costing them just in inspections, what they realized was that every time they would inspect it, the OCI, the overall condition index, would remain about the same. So they actually shifted their inspection to be a little bit less. In other words, as they examined the data, they realized we're actually inspecting these signs too often because there's not hardly any change. So unless there's some event that happens, whether it's knocked down or graffiti put on it or something like that, we're going to push back a little bit farther on our inspection just because we're over inspecting. So you might find you're under inspecting or over inspecting. So the good thing is Cartegraph software can help you manage that and help you discover those things. So there's a lot of questions that you can answer. If someone asks you, what does it cost us to inspect the sign? The activity. What's it cost us to send out someone and inspect the sign and then return to, what does that cost us? So I know as a client, when we had an episode where we had a lot of backflow issues. Backflows were tied into individual homes in a certain neighborhood, and a lot of customers didn't want that. So they turned off their non-potable watering system and wanted to replace the backflow device. So our town said, hey, we need to discover what it would cost us to go out, and perform that activity. And so thankfully, that's something we already have. So you have those needs, whether it's workflow, whether it's assets, and data will have the answers for you. So I'm using these illustrations to kind of, prompt your thinking, not saying that this particular asset or my particular experience has to be yours. I'm simply using these to illustrate and get your mind thinking, oh, yeah, well, you know what, I'm thinking about, this workflow or this asset that we, need some more information on, or maybe this would help me more. So I think that's really the purpose of it, is so you can kind of start thinking, okay, what is this costing me in labor, equipment, materials? What is this asset's lifespan or life cycle? What is it costing us to maintain this? Is it more expensive, less expensive? And I want to go to this next slide where we will see kind of an illustration of other data that really can provide you some answers. And this one, we asked the question, is one area costing me more than another? And if so, why? So in this situation, I have an arrow that's displaying a pointer to a certain area of the community where repair tasks have been pretty frequent in this area. Then we need to start asking ourselves questions. So as we look in the asset type, we see that there's several water mains that have needed to be repaired. We do have a sign and a hydrant, but there's water mains here. There's 3 water mains that have been repaired right in this area here. So, maybe that leads us to some conclusions. Maybe it doesn't, but, you need to at least ask yourself, is a particular area or a part of our jurisdiction costing us more than another? If it is, then why is it? Is there aging infrastructure there? Is it a higher value asset? Pavement can tend to cost, obviously, quite a bit of money compared sometimes to other assets. Ask yourself, are there trends at certain times of year? Are you noticing that at certain times of year we're seeing this event happen? I know one of the activities that an organization needed to capture was the fact that, and this will obviously vary according to geography, but in this was in the Southwest near where I live. They have kind of exposed pipes, but every year they have to go around on all the backflow prevention devices in the water department. They have to put these kind of insulated bonnets that go over them so that during the wintertime it doesn't freeze and the pipes burst and the water leaks. Now, you might be in an area of the country where you're like, oh, I don't deal with that. But I'm just pointing out there's an illustration where it goes to show that each organization is different. And in this case, they wanted to know, what does that activity cost us? We have to send someone out, insulate all those pipes, And, that costs us something. Would it be better to do it another way? And so even though that, like I said, even though that may not address your individual situation, there's other situations that are going to be unique to you that are going to, answer, hopefully prompt questions and then produce answers. I know in the Midwest, I grew up in the Midwest, and we had areas of town where the pavement tended to buckle when it, freeze and thaw. And we would see a lot more buckling in some types of areas than we did others. And so an investigation, needed to be had. But back when I did that years and years ago, we didn't have this kind of methodology and asking ourselves, we didn't have the data to prove anything. So we have an advantage using Cartegraph software that we can have this data, and this data can start producing these kind of answers that we need. The next one I want to go through about data having the answers is, what's the average cost per individual activity? I mean, I kind of broached this subject a little bit ago, but in this case, I've got a red arrow here by the task of flushing the hydrants. What is that costing per incident? What does it cost us overall? Well, the average cost, you see we've had 12 tasks regarding that, and the average cost is $146. And we get an average cost of what the labor, equipment, and average material cost. So the material cost is fairly high. So it looks like whenever we flush these hydrants, we're discovering other things need to be done. So then we need to ask ourselves, do we need to step up our inspection program? So these are the kind of things that data will speak to you that will start generating questions. Now, the answers may be yes, the answer may be no, the answer may be wait, but the important thing is that you're always managing what you have, and you're asking yourself these questions and getting the answers from data. If data doesn't have the answer outright, it will lead you to the answer. So, and then after we cover this patching task, I want to give you a really quick illustration of how this data really didn't have an answer in itself, but it revealed the path to the answer. And so I think that's important too. Even if data doesn't have an outright answer, it may lead you to the answer. In this patching activity, we see we have 10 patching activities at a cost of $356.80. Again, labor, equipment, and materials. Well, that all seems fairly normal. But I might want to look into these other costs. What was that for? What did that involve? It could have been as simple as, buying a shovel because the person didn't have it on them. In other words, I'm discovering things that I may not have known otherwise. So what is the cost, average cost per individual activity? What is going on? What is involved with, the patch or the flushing activity or any of these other ones that we see? What do they cost us per incident? What is it costing us per year, per month, however it is you want to break it down? You want to be able to have those answers so that the people who need the answers know, and you can then more effectively manage what you have. And then what is the data telling you? This is where I want to kind of, we addressed this a little bit. Certain brands or models of assets outperform others. You need improved workflow policy or daily operations. You need improved efficiency systems, communications. These are the kind of questions that this data is going to hopefully help you answer. Now, getting back to what I wanted to tell you about data leading you to the right answer. There was a situation that occurred where in the director at the time that I was working for asked me, and I was in the utilities department, as you heard at the beginning of this, and asked me how much is every water system costing us? What does it cost us? And I thought, well, I want to break it down by water meter, because I think that would be a more accurate reflection as opposed to just regular costs, because every water system in our community was a little bit different. And so this led me to obviously investigate the different water systems and what they were costing us. So as I dug into the system and began to extract data out, and then I divided it per however many meters we had in that system, made a unique discovery. And that discovery was that one area of town cost us just over or right at $25 per meter in order to maintain. It was a newer subdivision. There was not a lot of other things there other than the homes and the pipes that fed those homes. And so it was a fairly low-cost system. Another area of town, it was actually at the airport, cost us nearly $1,200 per meter. That's an enormous, enormous difference. So when I showed my director that cost difference, his eyes, of course, got real big, and he goes, "Todd, what does this mean?" Now, data did not have the answer, but the good thing is it led us to the right answer. So in this case, the reason that it was so much more expensive was it caused us to dig down further, and I said, okay, here is work that's showing up that we rehabbed 2 wells on site at the airport. There's a 16-inch fire suppression line that goes around the circumference of the airport. We rehabbed some of that. There are 3 on-site emergency fire pump stations that we did some maintenance on, and we also are due to repaint the 500,000-gallon storage tank that is there. And he said, "Oh, okay." He goes, he says, "The town manager has just asked me to provide him some data," and he goes, What do you think that means?" I go, "I think it'll prompt a great discussion." And it certainly did, because the reason is because there were 1,899 meters on that subdivision that only cost us $25 per meter. There were only 11 meters at the airport. So we only had 11 accounts out at the airport because it wasn't heavy on business as far as individual businesses. A few hangars had water meters, things like that. But our city was involved in trying to get some commerce out of the airport, realizing that it was a great location and it would be a good location for businesses to seek out. It wasn't really expensive. It had great access to the freeway, etc. And then obviously you've got the airport right there. So it ended up generating a discussion and saying, listen, we really need some more commerce out at the airport. So our community development director was set out with the task of trying to attract more businesses to the airport, because that would obviously bring down and make more cost-effective that area of the town that was costing us more, because there were a lot more expensive assets in that area. So while the data did not tell us the answer, it led us to the right answer. And that's really what I want to make as our main strongest point today, is that in the process of data mining for asset information, you're going to be generating data. Data does have answers, but then data will also tell you other things that will lead you to the answer. So I think what it is more than anything is really getting to know your system, trying to mine as much data out of there as possible, and then allowing that data to really speak to you, to start answering some questions so that you can be prepared whenever that time comes that, you have some type of emergency, or you need to, say something before your leadership or council, so that you can have the answers that are ready for you, or ready for them when they need those. I think that really shows the value of the system. I think not only that, but internally it can assist you answering the questions like, what brands or models of assets are we buying? Are we over, inspecting them? Are we under inspecting them? Are we managing them the most effectively possible? Those are the kind of questions that are going to be answered as we seek out all of these different areas and begin to hopefully answer some of those questions that are coming up. So I think those are the kind of things that will improve your efficiency. It'll improve the systems you have. It'll improve communication. But most of all, it'll really, save your organization money and me personally, and in the clients I've talked to as I started working for Cartegraph nearly a year ago, was one of the things that's really stood out is that the data that Cartegraph produces is extremely helpful, not only for all the reasons we talked about just now, but one of the really cool things that I've experienced, and like I said, in talking to clients, they have really experienced, is a really increased citizen engagement and citizen accountability. It's really refreshing when a citizen hears a public works department or another department within your organization, utilities, parks, whatever it is, when they can see that you have the answers for them, you know, and even the little minuscule details. I know it really means a lot to them. The more data you have and the more information you have, it gives them the confidence to know that you're doing your very best to be a good steward of what taxpayers have provided for you, and gives you the opportunity to really effectively manage that in a way that you know that you're doing the best, you're getting the most ROI out of the software. You're really, you know, maximizing the life cycle of the assets. You're doing the things that the software was designed to do, and you're getting the most information possible out of it. And so that's really the kind of questions you need to ask yourself. Am I getting the most out of it? If not, what is it that I need to do to get more information out of this? Do I need to add some more data? Because, you know, I'm going to need to have reports that tell me, you know, I'm in this area of town or this jurisdiction or whatever it is. Putting that data in will help you obviously get that data out, and then you can start answering a lot more questions than you could previously. So I think, you know, to sum up, that's really what it's all about. It's about effectively managing what you've been given, and as you begin to produce data and as it begins to speak to you, one of the things, the benefits that you'll get in addition to everything else I've said, is that you will really know what you have. You'll know how to manage it. You'll know so much more than you did before you started mining for data and gathering information. You'll know your community better. You'll know the assets. You'll know the workflows, how to be more efficient, how to do a better job at managing everything from the assets to the inventory to the data to the workflows to the daily operations. It'll help you create policies. All these incredible things will happen as you start mining the data and letting that data answer some questions, or at least lead you to the answers that you need. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you have a question, as Natalie said earlier, feel free to use that chat feature and ask that question. Just type it out and we'll be glad to answer it. And if you put some questions in already, I'm glad. Hopefully we can answer those, but we'll just take a few minutes here and answer some questions if you have any. And as always, you know, I want to thank you for being here today and participating in this webinar. And hopefully it's generated some thoughts and encouraged you to dig a little deeper and maybe mine a little bit more data out of your system. And hopefully the end result will be you get more answers. You know, it's a great thing when your leadership can look at you and say, hey, you know, great job getting that data. That provided a lot of answers for us. That's a wonderful feeling. So I really hope that that's the result of this and that you do get the most value possible out of Cartegraph software. Natalie, do we have any questions?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Todd. That was an awesome presentation. The first question is, if someone's just getting started with data mining and reporting, what one tip would you give them for getting started?
I would encourage you to do something that will kind of create an immediate benefit. Something simple like whatever asset it is that you're managing, get the total cost. You know, what does this cost us? Now, if you have not associated work to that asset yet, but you maybe have some information on installation costs or something like that, get that. If all you've been doing is some work management, just set some date ranges and say, this is how much labor we have averaged per week, this is how many hours, this is what it's cost us. So start with something small, something simple, and then build on that. So in other words, once you get the total of, well, this is how much these assets cost us, well, start breaking it down. How much did this brand of asset, or do I have that brand in there? You start, going from there, and it builds off each other. And so you just start thinking of what more information will you need. And starting out, I know when I was a client and when I used Cartegraph software, I laughed. My first reports were very, very simple. But what I realized is that from those, it forced me to think. So as I generated the data and saw it on a report, as I looked at that report, I'm like, oh, you know what? I probably ought to know this. Let's dig in there and see if we have it. And if we didn't, we added the data. So it could be a great adventure. I know sometimes time is tight, and you may not have all the time you want to dedicate to it. But what time you can, start out small, generate a couple little reports that give some information, and then just build on those.
Great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions yet. So I will go ahead and we'll wrap up. Tomorrow or the next day, we'll be following up with a recording of this webinar. So if there's anything Todd talked about that you want to go back and listen to again or get some more ideas, we'll be sending out that recording. And definitely feel free to respond to that email with any questions that might come up between now and then. So I'll go ahead and thank Todd, and thank you all for joining us. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. We sure appreciate you being a part of it today.